Welcome to the Beach Brothers Show, Virginia business and politics. It's time to get beachy. Conrad is our political analyst and master chess instructor. So contact Conrad to appear on our show. Jose Cruz is our bilingual beach bully, our bilingual business bully. Contact him to feature your business on our show. I'm Seko Varner. I have consulting, entertainment, and credit repair services. I produce the Beach Brothers Show. You want to give a salute to Tally and Twine. It's time for you to have a high quality watch made in Virginia, made in Portsmouth, Virginia, from Tally and Twine. We want to say thanks to Southern Volkswagen Greenbrier for their great level of sponsorship. If you need a new car, you don't need to go far. Southern Volkswagen Greenbrier. And ladies, if you want your brows to say, wow, check out IamLitaWee.com. Microblading by IamLitaWee.com. I'm Seko Varner. I do credit fixes, tax resolutions. I lend private money to real estate investors, and we do debt consolidations. If you need any of these services, contact me as provided. And now it's time to get beachy on the Beach Brothers Show. All right, and speaking of beachy, today we're going to expand our beach, if you will. Life's a beach. And we're going to expand our beach, if you will. We have returning to the show. Now, back in the day, he was on this show, and we had a really interesting conversation, but we didn't get a chance to talk about his support of BLM. We'll have to do that in this one. But today, we have the good brother returning with us, the good brother, Spike Cohen. What's good? How you doing, Spike? He's still getting himself together.
I can't, if you can hear me, I can't hear you.
I do.
Okay. So we're going to have you pop back in. We're going to take you out and let you pop back in, okay? All right. So jump back in the studio. All right. So, hey, it's time for the Beach Brothers Show. What do we have on the show today, good brother?
Well, if you want to talk about expansion, remember, South Carolina has a prominent beach too. They got Myrtle Beach, but we're in direct competition with Myrtle Beach with our Virginia Beach versus Myrtle situation. I don't think Spike lives near the Myrtle Beach area, if I recall. But this is Virginia Beach. We're going to focus on Virginia Beach and expanding our show's outreach to really good ideas in politics. We always like to branch out into that. That's why we're bringing on Spike again. Remember, we did have him on. He tonight is going to be from his good studio as opposed to being in a car like he was last time. So he's going to have great audio, great video. He's going to have a good amount of time to sit down and talk the good stuff with us. So I'm glad we're able to get Mr. Spike back. I hear him popping.
All right, speaking of having Spike back,
yes,
I think Spike's back.
I'm back. How are you guys doing?
Doing excellent. Hey, Spike, take a moment and introduce yourself, good brother.
Hi, everyone. I'm Spike Cohen, and I was the Libertarian candidate for vice president for last year. We came in third. I also am a business owner. I have been owning and operating small businesses for 23 years now. Goodness, man, I'm old. 23 years, and I've been a libertarian activist for many years as well. I'm also the host of My Fellow Americans and the co-host of the Muddy Waters of Freedom, both of which are on Muddied Waters Media, which is available on all social media and podcasting platforms.
All right, good. So for those of us who are new to this concept of a third party, I like the way you put that, we came in third. For those who are new to this concept of a third party, most people just know about the Dems and the Repubs.
Yes.
What are the Libs? Tell me about the Libertarians.
So in a nutshell, Libertarians believe that people do best when they're most free. We didn't need, like you, we didn't need to see this, the results of this pandemic to know that government has absolutely failed us when it comes to healthcare. We didn't need to see the increasing unrest that is happening on the in the streets to know that bad actors in government are not being held accountable when they hurt people, and that there's increasing division between people that's being fostered by politicians. We didn't need these ridiculous stimulus bills that show us that we are handed a few hundred of our own dollars while trillions of dollars are being handed off to crony corporations, to know that this system was not made to benefit us. It was made to benefit a very small handful of incredibly powerful billionaire cronies. We didn't need 2020 to show us that the system that Republicans and Democrats have created has not served us, was not made for us. And we recognize that the problem is that power and money and freedom and opportunity has been stolen from the people and put in the hands of a very small handful of people. And the only way we're ever going to get the things that we want is to kick these clowns and their cronies out of office and take all of that power and put it back in the hands of the people where it always damn well belonged.
Intriguing.
That's that great spirit that I always like to hear, that I remember so much from my own days within the Libertarian Party itself. For you specifically, you touched on briefly your podcast, various podcasts, and you do TV interviews, you do radio bits. You're pretty much a rising political force. And in your efforts this past year, of course, you ran for vice president. You almost got arrested in Miami over COVID protocols. You've interviewed British rapper Zuby. You've had on Cheryl Atkinson, the CBS investigator who worked on the Fast and Furious scandal. And of course, she also had people say that they were spying on her, and she was fired from her own organization. But you've had a really energetic year. Give us a rundown on the most fun and eventful moments of your past 365 days.
I would definitely say almost getting arrested in Miami was the most fun. Is that the most fun I've had in the last year? It's definitely up there. And this gives me a perfect segue to talk about it. So I'm going to claim that's it's close enough anyway that I can say that's the most fun that I've had all year. And to give a brief explanation of what happened there that Conrad was talking about, we had an event on our bus tour route. It was actually the final event of the bus tour for the campaign that ended in Miami, and it was supposed to coincide with the debate between Biden and Trump that was going to happen in Miami. Trump ended up getting COVID, so they ended up just having Trump at one town hall and Biden at another town hall, and we were going to do an event at a place called Cuba Ocho, which is on Calle Ocho. It's an institution in Little Havana, and anyone that lives in that area knows that it's been around for decades. It's one of the institutions that makes up the Little Havana area in Cuba, or in Miami. And so we go, we get there on the bus, and right before we get there, it's supposed to be an event of about 50 to 100 people. Right when we get there, we find out that the police just shut down the venue, and they cited COVID restrictions or COVID violations. But when they gave the 24-hour shutdown notice to the owner, Roberto, he was there by himself. So no one knows exactly what COVID restriction he violated, and they didn't tell him. So it was a corrupt shutdown of a third-party event because they didn't want competition for Trump and Biden. And so when we got there on the bus, there were already dozens of people outside that were supposed to be in the event that were being told that they couldn't be, and a crowd of people gathering outside besides them wondering what the heck's going on, and also a bunch of cops there. And they asked me what I wanted to do. And I said, well, we're here. Our supporters are here. And our message is still the same. And in fact, this just underlines what it is we're talking about. And they said, well, yes, it is illegal to have a demonstration outside right now because of COVID restrictions. And I said, we have a First Amendment guaranteed right to peaceful assembly. Most of the people out there I see are wearing masks. There's more than enough room for us to have a decent amount of space. and we're going to have our event. So I went out, and the police were right there across the street, and we just started doing the event. I did everything that I was going to do inside, except now I did it outside with a bullhorn. And we ended up having way more people see it because now we're outside on a Friday night or was it a Thursday night? Anyway, I believe it was Friday. Anyway, whatever. On a busy night in downtown Miami, and we had way more people. Then we had a salsa party because if you're already there, you're on Cuba Ocho. Why not have a salsa party? So we danced till like 2 a.m. and ended up having a couple thousand people come by over the course of the event. Ended up being a way bigger event than it would have been because they wouldn't just let us assemble in peace. So we assembled in slightly less peace. And we had a bunch of media come out, which I think is the reason why we didn't get arrested, because it would have looked really bad arresting people for, dancing peacefully outside.
Now, before I ask about Zuby and whatnot, do you salsa dance?
Yeah, my wife and I are actually very avid salsa dancers. I know when you look at me, your first thought is, this man clearly is an accomplished dancer. Clearly. But no, but no, I actually am I am a pretty decent amateur level. I'm not a pro or anything, but I am actually a pretty good Latin dancer. Yeah.
You ever try bachata?
What's that?
You ever try bachata?
Yeah, bachata. We did bachata. So my big dances are salsa, bachata, of course merengue, but merengue is basically walking to music. And then what else? I do some swing dancing, but it's mostly salsa and bachata and cha-cha. But we did it was a salsa event, and again, it was what we were going to do inside, but it was going to be with maybe 3 or 4 dozen people instead of 500 or 600 people. But hey, listen, they told us we couldn't do it outside, so we did it outside.
All right, so we have Dancing with the Libertarian Stars coming soon. Salud a las salseros. Todos mis salseros. All my salsa dancers. Big up, big up. That's good to hear, man. Good to hear. Conrad.
Hey, tell us about interviewing Zuby.
So Zuby is a rapper based out of London. And I had him on my show because, also, first of all, to thank him for letting us use his music on our show for quite a bit without any kind of copyright hits or anything like that. But also because he is increasingly, it's interesting. Zuby is actually somewhat apolitical, but because he started sharing his pretty vanilla, mundane opinions on Twitter, he increasingly became this lightning rod, because what was once considered a pretty straightforward, set of beliefs that he was promoting, he got labeled especially within the UK, as being some kind of far right winger. And it was interesting having the conversation with him. He's being presented as this right wing lightning rod. And he's really not. Like, he's pretty much a centrist, at least by American terms. And he ended up generating massive amounts of controversy. And he's been leveraging it to his ability to be able to promote his music and things like that. But he's an unlikely political figure, because he doesn't really he's not very partisan. And he has a set of beliefs that he believes to be common sense. And, not necessarily everyone agrees with everything he says. But it's actually, his beliefs were shockingly mainstream and almost, a word I can look for it is mundane. Like, his beliefs are pretty straightforward, especially knowing his background, that he's the son of I believe Nigerian immigrants, but African immigrants, and knowing many people who are themselves either African or West Indian immigrants, or the descendant of African or West Indian immigrants. He's pretty much like every one of them that I've ever met, and it was just very interesting to see that him just basically giving his fairly straightforward opinions on Twitter turned him into this kind of unlikely a political lightning rod, if you will.
It looks like he has a lot of energy. He was on Candace Owens' show So I can't wait to see. I'm going to have to check that out. If he was on Candace Owens' show, that's got to be intriguing.
Yeah, he actually just came out with a fitness book. And this little clip here shows you that the man's definitely in good shape. And he definitely, although I want to say, I mean, I'm not sure I could skip around like that, but I actually kept a pretty good pace for 4 months. But I definitely wasn't jumping around on my heels and balls on my feet like that. I could probably do that for about 10, 15 seconds probably.
I'm just trying to get back into running. I don't look like I want to go on stage and do this for about 30 minutes.
Right.
Like that, I would probably die.
Yeah, while rapping, because keep in mind,
Exactly.
He's not just doing that. He's rapping too. I couldn't do that. I'd have to choose one or the other. Either one would last for about 10, 15 seconds.
Now, circling back a bit to politics and your podcast and interviews so much, Ms. Atkinson for CBS. Remember, Fast and Furious was back in early 2009, if I recall. Mm-hmm. That was the Obama administration.
Yes.
So break down having her on, what she exposed, what happened to her, and just the story of you meeting her and speaking with her.
Sure. So, Zuby, Cheryl Atkinson, I just had someone on this last night, actually, a guy named Lenny Jarrett, who's a education reform advocate who has spoken across the country. These are the types of guests. It's a very eclectic mix of guests that I have on my show, My Fellow Americans. The purpose of My Fellow Americans is to talk to people who have risen to some level of prominence because of one or more issues. And usually it's typically either exposing something that, government is doing poorly, which is not hard because, right before this show, I tried putting together a comprehensive list of things that government doesn't suck at. And I actually, I couldn't come up with anything. But there's people that have exposed something that government isn't doing well or that could be done better. People that have been victims of harm by government, like Cheryl Atkinson. People who have given controversial opinions on public forums, like Zuby has. People like that, and to try to talk with them about those issues and present a libertarian take on it. That's sort of the purpose of the show. Cheryl Atkinson, she exposed the fact or she was one of the reporters that exposed the fact that the Obama administration was giving guns to Mexican gun cartels, Mexican drug cartels, to track them and see what they were going to be used for, basically. And more than likely, it was probably because it was a favor that was due to those cartels for something they had done for the U.S. government, because part of the war on drugs is the long and sordid history of the U.S. government working with drug cartels. But so they basically gave and sold guns. It was a gun walking scandal where they actually gave and sold guns to Mexican drug cartels. And that resulted in many Americans being killed by Mexican drug cartels with those guns, including a Border Patrol agent. And she exposed that. And shortly afterwards, she found out through forensic pathology and experts on cybersecurity that she was being spied on. And eventually they were able to get, through a Freedom of Information Act request, they were able to find out that, yes, she was being spied on by the Obama administration, and that the Obama administration had been spying on many reporters who were reporting on him and his administration in less than favorable terms. And of course, this is nothing new. It's spying on reporters certainly didn't begin with Obama, and I doubt it ended with him either. But it was, kind of showed exactly what was happening at that time. And she now talks about the growing narrative-driven nature of media. That media is becoming less and less about presenting news and then having people who give an opinion on that news and then kind of letting you decide whether you agree with that or not. And it's increasingly becoming just taking news, presenting crafting a narrative about it, and then presenting that to you as news. And it's happening on the left and the right. And because people are becoming increasingly unable to tell the difference or to know the difference between news and a narrative or editorialism, it's blurring that line. where people don't really know how to be able to find out what the truth is anymore. And so that was what I talked with her about.
Intriguing. Well, let's talk about 2021. So, what's the 2021 version of Spike? Is it easier this month than it was several months ago when you were running for VP? Is it about the same? What are you looking to do in 2021? And then the second question is, what are the Libertarians looking to do in 2021?
So I'll answer the first part first. Things are certainly less hectic than they were, during the campaign, but not as much as I thought it would be. I thought after the election, everyone would say, okay, election's over. And then I'd go to bed and be left alone for at least a few months. And that did not happen even remotely. In fact, I just got back from California this past weekend. I attended and spoke at a conference called Reopen Cal Now, which is an anti-lockdown group of health policy experts and sheriffs and elected officials and other professionals who are saying that the science behind why these lockdowns were justified in the first place is fundamentally flawed, and that it is time to reopen California, and for that matter, America, in a way that is safe and able to actually effectively combat this virus without destroying the lives and livelihoods of countless Americans in the process. And I spoke at that. I was there for the weekend. I was just on Kennedy last night. And things continue to ramp up. This month, the reach on my social media was the highest it's ever been, even during the height of the campaign. So I'm busy, but they at least let me stay home. I don't have to fly to a different state every single day. So it's certainly a little bit less hectic. In terms of what the Libertarian Party is trying to do, the short answer is we need to grow this party at the grassroots level if we're ever going to want to achieve the things that we want to do. In this last election, Joe Jorgensen and I got the second highest number of votes that the Libertarian Party has ever gotten, and the highest number of votes that the Libertarian Party has ever gotten in a race where a president is running for re-election. Because we know that statistically, during the times that someone's running for re-election, voters are much more hardened to either vote for that candidate to keep them in or to vote against that candidate to keep them out. More so than to consider a third option. That coupled with the pandemic and the lockdowns and all the difficulties there, we did very well. And that's unacceptable. The fact that after nearly 50 years of existence, the Libertarian Party is still reliant on, factors that have absolutely nothing to do with us or our campaign or anything else. It's entirely external factors to determine not if we win or not if we do well enough to get on the debate stage or not, but what single digit number we get in our race. And the answer is we have to look at where we are doing well. We are doing well in local races, in city council races, county council races, the occasional state legislative race. We are not winning state or federal races. And that tells me two things. Number one, we're not big enough for state and federal races yet. And we still have to run them because of ballot access rules. We have to run in those races to be able to be on the ballot as the Libertarian Party in most states. But we're not there yet to actually be able to win them. And number two, we have a formula to win as libertarians. We have a way to run libertarian candidates to win races as libertarians. We have to build out our base of support, and we have to apply those principles that we have seen how we can win those races and begin and continue to scale it up to be able to effectively win congressional races, gubernatorial races, mayoral and city council races in larger cities, and eventually the White House. And so that is my focus. Grow the party, show candidates and activists how to effectively message, how to effectively grow. And, I believe that I want to end the era of losing admirably. I think it is time for us to start really seriously winning elections.
Okay. Well, I said in our last conversation that for the very first time that I knew of strategically, I voted for the Libertarian Party. I voted for you and Joe Jorgensen for the 2020 POTUS race.
Thank you.
How do you attract more people like me?
When you're saying people like you, do you mean specifically black people or people that are on the I just want to make, when you're saying like you, specifically meaning,
Yeah, well, I actually wanted to see where you went with it but you asked a clarifying question. So I wanted, okay, it worked. So let's ask both questions. How do you attract more people of African descent, indigenous descent here in America? And how do you attract more people who are dissatisfied with both of the major parties?
Sure. So honestly, a lot of that answer is the same, but specifically for people of color, specifically for people of African descent, the descendants of slaves, people that are the descendants of African migrants, people that are the descendant of indigenous native people, or for that matter, sexual and gender minorities, marginalized people in general. We recognize that the government is often an agent of harm precisely because of the very organization of how government works, that it is the centralization of power into the hands of a very small few. And we recognize that when power is centralized into the hands of a very small few, it is often used disproportionately more in negative ways against those with the least power. Because, any predator typically, unfortunately, goes after the easiest prey. And in this arrangement, the prey, or the people that are more likely to, have less ability to fight back or to be able to effectively stop what's being done to them, are those marginalized groups. And so I believe that not only is our message inherently and intuitively geared towards people that are members of these groups, but that we have a moral duty as libertarians to primarily reach out to these groups. Seko, if I were to walk into a building and I see one person getting, slapped around and hit in the face, and I see another guy being beaten down with a baseball bat, yes, harm is being done to both of these groups, and it's bad. But I would be, in my mind, have a major problem with priorities if I didn't initially and immediately focus on the person who's being beaten down with a baseball bat, especially if it's with the knowledge that by stopping the guy that's beating the person down with the baseball bat, I'm also eventually stopping the guy that's slapping the other person around. If we recognize that things like the war on drugs, the war on guns, the war on livelihoods, the war on victimless crimes, the war on income, the war on the border, all of these wars that the government is inflicting upon the people is disproportionately harming certain groups, then it would make sense to advocate to those groups that we recognize that they're being disproportionately harmed, and that our solutions will fix these problems. They'll fix them for everyone, but they'll especially fix them for those who are being harmed the most. Speaking to people that are, as you said, kind of on the fence of how to, of whether or not to vote for a third party, or to whether or not to continue voting for a lesser evil. My primary focus is on people who either would not vote otherwise, that either they're not voting right now because they already recognize that Republicans and Democrats, that voting Republican is a total waste of time, which means they're already 80% of the way there. If I don't have to convince you that you don't have to worry about voting Republican so the Democrats don't get in, or voting Democrat so the Republicans don't get in, if you already recognize that they're a waste of time, that's all just a big con game, then all I have to do then is just show you why maybe you should consider voting for us. So that is why I primarily reach out to people like that. And the answer of how I reach out to folks like that is with that message. Listen, we're with you. Voting for the people that created this mess is a great way to continue getting this mess. And we recognize that.
Say that again. That's a soundbite.
Voting. I try to do a lot of sound bites when possible. Voting for the people that created this mess is a great way to continue having this mess. And when we vote differently, not just, and when I say differently, I'm not presenting you with just a different party. I'm not trying to present you with a lesser of three evils instead of two. I am telling you that this system is endemic and a result of the policies that have been put in place by really one group, two parties, but one group who share a common belief that things go best when they are in total control of every single aspect of your life and rob you whenever they see fit. and that we as libertarians recognize that that arrangement not only is wrong from a moral standpoint, because people shouldn't be able to hurt you and order you around and take your things, but it also doesn't work. If I can take from you and everyone else that's watching this whenever I see fit, if I can order you around whenever I want to, I don't have to give you good value, because the reality is I can just order you around. I don't have to prove to you that what I'm doing is good, and I don't have to make you believe that what I'm doing is good, because I can just order you around, and I don't have to be a good steward of what I have. I don't have to make smart decisions and smart choices with what I've taken from you, because I can just take more from you. And at some point, you're not necessarily going to make the best choices with what you have, because I can just come and take it from you at any time. And if we look at all of the harmful abuses and inequities and bad arrangements that have happened as a result of what we have right now, we're really just looking at the logical consequences of Republicrats setting up a system whereby they presume the authority to take from you and order you around whenever you see fit. And the only way to fix that is kick them out and give the people the power back.
Well, we can tell by that you just got a soundbite that you are very engaging and a great personality. And here at the Beach Brothers Show, we're always looking for great brands in the 757 area. So on you yourself, would you say that you are by now your own brand, or perhaps you are, say, a brand that is more linked to libertarianism?
I think to whatever extent I have my own brand, it certainly is linked to libertarianism, because my goal is not to create a Spike Cohen brand that is anything other than presenting a message of liberty. This has never been about my own personal political ambition. Let's be clear. If I were doing all of this for my own personal political ambitions, I wouldn't be doing it in a third party. I would be doing it in one of the, the established old parties, and use the cheat code of working my way through that. And I live in a very red a district in a very red state. I live in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. We were Trump country before Trump was even running for office. And so, like, literally Trump used to do events here and stuff like that, like long before he was running for anything. If I were to try to work, if this were about me building my brand solely, I'd run as a Republican, and I might even still say a lot of the things I'm saying now, but I'd be primarily focused on getting my name out there, under an established banner and being able to reach as many people as possible. That's not my goal, and it never has been. To whatever extent I am able to get my message out there, it is to the idea of giving people the most radical and empathetic message that exists. You own yourself. And you own your body and your labor and your property, and it is inherently belongs to you. And there are powerful people who have robbed you of those things and have conditioned you with the belief that it does not belong to you. It is a form of mass control, and it has led to terrible outcomes. And the only way we can fix the problems is by eliminating that system, by completely dismantling it, not reforming it, dismantling it, and putting that power back in your hands. That is my goal. That is my and if I will, I need to explain why I'm even doing this in the first place. 4 years ago, I was diagnosed with MS. And when they were discussing my treatments for MS, which is a very serious illness, they presented me with my treatment options. And they told me, Mr. Cohen, the purpose of these treatment options, the goal is to slow down the progression of your MS so much that it's not much different than just the regular aging process. That hit me like a ton of bricks. In that moment, I had been so worried about MS and what's it going to do to my life, and how am I going to live now, and how much long, am I going to not live as long, and am I going to have this problem? And I realized something. None of that matters. We're already, even if they're able to slow it down to where it's just like everyone else is aging, we're already marching our way down to eventually not being here anymore. 100 years from now, none of us will exist. All that will matter is the impact that we will have made on the people around us. And if that impact is large enough, then it will continue to exist and perpetuate itself long after we're gone, long after the people we directly affected are gone. If we've been able to actually make changes that change communities, that change lives on a mass scale, that is the only thing. I used to be filled with fears. My only fear now is that I end up, when I'm not here, I'm not able, before I end up not being here anymore, that I'm not able to say that I wasn't able to help as many people as possible around me. That is the only thing that drives me now.
2021 might be a new political paradigm, at least compared to 2020. That, wreck-filled year. It's not a national election year. The presidency is now sort of a corporate neoliberal Democrat as opposed to a corporate neoconservative Republican.
Right. Massive change. Yeah.
The legislator is a mix of the same corporate Dems and the same corporate Republicans, but Dems now have a slight edge in the U.S. Senate, and new legislation could be possible. So how should libertarians react to this? How should they take on the year of 2021?
Well, I think, as at the position we are in terms of our size and platform, we are not at a size to be able to shift the public debate. So what we have to do is we have to enter into the public debate and get our ideas into whatever's being talked about and present it in our way, and then try to shift it that way by presenting the best ideas in the most dynamic and engaging way possible. So for example, we are about to have some serious tough on crime, domestic terror legislation. Joe Biden and Republicans and Democrats in Congress were just handed on a silver platter the pretext to pass all the stuff that they've been wanting to pass for several years now. Stuff that will make the Patriot Act look like an absolute cakewalk. Things that will make the 1994 crime bill look like a meek suggestion. This Capitol Hill riot is being framed as this, mass terror event that we now have to implement all these new laws. Now, of course, you and I recognize that whenever we have new laws, without fail, whatever reason that we were told that they're implemented, they're going to be implemented against the most marginalized among us, because that's what's easiest to do. So, when Biden introduced the 1994 crime bill, which ended up resulting in more people of color being put in cages than at any single point in human history, including the slavery era, he did it saying that it was there to target drug cartels and kingpins. And instead, the U.S. government through the CIA and the DEA made relationships with drug cartels and kingpins while putting poor people, especially poor people of color, in prison, because that's what builds up the prison industrial complex. That's
Thanks,
where
America.
you get lots of exactly. That's where you can get lots of free prison labor. And we can do this with anything. The Patriot Act was supposed to go against terror groups. It's largely used in people making small terror threats to one another and used as an excuse not to have to get a warrant. What else? The war on drugs in general. Things like no-knock raids end up resulting in the murder of people like Breonna Taylor. The increased enforcement and militarization that has come from our police forces results in heavily armed cops basically ambushing. How am I forgetting his name? The young man in the 12-year-old boy in Cleveland who.
Oh, right.
Tamir Rice.
I knew it started with a T. Or John Crawford in Walmart. The elimination of holding police officers accountable with the introduction of qualified immunity, which allows officers to basically do whatever they want without impunity, leads to things like the murder of George Floyd. These are things that were passed with a stunning bipartisan approval, to rapturous applause from corporate media that they're finally keeping us safe. And then when everything blows up in our faces, they go, how could this ever possibly have happened? And now they're going to do it again. Now they're going to introduce domestic terror legislation. Well, guess who they're going to mostly consider to be domestic terrorists?
Black Lives Matter.
This guy.
Black Lives Matter. And for that matter, a lot of mainstream, conservatives and Tea Partiers too. Yeah. But yes, this is going to primarily be used against those who don't have the power. Oh, and gun control. That's definitely coming. And now Joe Biden doesn't have to go to Congress. Donald Trump set the precedent of using executive orders for gun control. He banned suppressors, he banned bump stocks, and he used through the ATF rule changes, he banned entire types of weapons like long barrel pistols, like the so-called like the honey badger. He also multiple other rule changes on certain types of ammunitions. All of this happened without even setting foot in Congress and allowing for there to be a greater debate in Congress and among the American people around whether or not this is a good idea. And that is a direct result of the continued executivization of our federal government, where increasingly things are done by executive fiat. The president signs off on something and it simply happens, and Congress doesn't do anything about it, and the Supreme Court rules it to be okay because there's already precedent of them doing that. We are effectively losing the concept of co-equal branches of government, and we are going to see that on steroids this year. And if anyone complains about it, Joe Biden will be able to correctly say, Trump did it.
You know, I was just talking with my family about this very same thing, that when I look at American history, for my people in American history, whenever whites get upset with the government, there's a massacre. So we have what happened in Atlanta. We have what happened in Rosewood. We have what happened in Mississippi. We have what happened in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Yep.
And
Wall Street, yeah.
you know, I'm telling people, hey, look, arm yourself or harm yourself, because the people that were able to do this were the people who were supposed to stop it from happening.
Eureka. Here is the cycle of government encroachment in our lives. First, government fails at doing what they were supposed to do. Then they introduce new rules and new empowerment and new legislation that gives them more power, which is largely used against people who had absolutely nothing to do with whatever reason that they were giving in the first place. And then they fail even harder, because now not only are they failing, but they have even more money and more resources to fail. And the bigger you get built up, the harder that you fail. And then the cycle continues on from there. That is what happens. And the people that are left at the short end of the stick are always those who have the least amount of institutional power. This is both economic and social power. And that happens as a direct result of a system that was not made for us. And when I say us, I mean the 99.99% of Americans who do not have immediate on-demand access to the people in power over us. And for that 0.001% that do, they not only do they own, 30 to 40% of all the wealth in this country. That's the consequence of the real power they hold, which is that they're the only ones who are able to snap their fingers and get whatever they want. Imagine if you went to Congress and said, hey, listen, I need enough money to pay my bills this month, and I don't need to work for it. And I need enough money to pay my bills next month and the month after that and the month after that too. Now, make it happen. I don't care how. And it simply happened. That would be serious institutional power that we clearly don't have, because the government told us all to stay home until further notice, and then gave us $1,200 once a few months ago and just gave us $600 now. But what they did do at that time was hand trillions of dollars off to the people who did have the power to go in and say, hey, look, I don't want this to affect my bottom line even remotely. So make it happen.
Well, all right. I know you're a person who follows Hebrew culture as well. We just gave Americans $600, but we gave billions to Israel. Yep. Make it make sense for me. Make it make sense for me. I don't understand that.
So we gave, I think, $1.3 billion to Israel, which is per capita the wealthiest country in the Middle East. So, of course, they also gave $700 million to, I believe, the Sudan. There was a few hundred million that went to Turkey. There was several billion that went across the world. There's $1.4 billion that went to something called the Asian Stability Pact or something like that. And no one quite knows what that is, which means they basically funded something that doesn't exist yet. So I guess we're going to find out what fun and exciting things are about to be spent in Asia. Certainly that won't end poorly. And this is what happens, right? When government is told, hey, listen, we need help, they go, all right, yeah. We'll get to you. First, let's figure out how we're going to get this thing passed. So they go to the cronies who put them in office, both Republicans and Democrats. They go to the cronies and go, what do you guys need? And they go, we need this, we need that, we need this, we need that. Okay, good. So we got all that. And then they go to their government agencies and they go, hey, what do you guys need? And the agencies go, oh, we need this, we need that, we need this, we need that. And then so they put all that together. And then they go to their allies across the country, across the world, and go, hey, do you guys need anything right now? Are you guys good? We're out getting stuff. And they go, yeah, let me get $1.3 billion. And so they give them that. And then so all that's been put together. And then they get together and go, how do we convince the American people that this is actually for them? $600 there, done. We got it. Nailed it. So what just happened with this newest stimulus bill? You got $600, and you also got about a $2,800 bill with interest.
I haven't even gotten to 600 yet.
Yeah,
Well,
you may or may not. You may or may not get the 600, but you are absolutely getting that $2,800 bill. Now, if it makes you feel any better, the vast majority of that's actually going to be paid by your children and grandchildren long after you aren't here anymore.
All right. Andrea Dixon asked a great question. In order to penetrate the monopoly of the two-part system, particularly in local and state elections, would you consider consolidating the Libertarian Party, the People's Party, and the Green Party based on policies and processes you can agree on? Thank you for Queen Andrea Dixon.
That's a great question. Yeah, that's a great question. So, Andrea, the thing is, I believe that we should be doing coalitioning. So, for example, if there is a state or a city or a district where there is a Green Party candidate that's running that we don't have a Libertarian candidate in that, I would 100% recommend to Libertarians in that area to consider voting Green Party, especially if it's a close race where they actually have a shot of winning. And conversely, if there were a situation where there was a Libertarian that is running in a district or a city or jurisdiction or whatever, that there isn't a Green Party or People's Party or DSA candidate who is also running, I would encourage those members of those parties and those ways of thinking to vote for the Libertarian candidate. When it comes to actually consolidating the parties, my concern is that we have things that we absolutely agree on when it comes to things like ending the war on drugs, holding bad actors in government accountable, ending the wars overseas, getting rid of the cronyism in government. But when it comes to other things like, for example, gun control or healthcare or just general economic and monetary policy, we are as widely divergent as it possibly gets. So I think that there's far more to be gained by us agreeing on what we can agree on and agreeing to a coalition than to try to sit down and figure out how can we consolidate our parties by, I compromise on this and you compromise on this. I think we end up in a situation where no one's truly happy. And also, I think that it eventually leads to discord within those organizations, because ultimately you have people coming in going, I'm not going to agree to this. I don't like this. I don't like that. I don't want to be in the same party and running under the same slate as folks that are that I disagree with this vehemently on this many issues. I think it's far better to focus, like Brian Lambrecht mentioned, in Illinois, focusing on things that we can agree on, getting ballot access for everyone so we can all be on the ballot, and helping candidates in districts where we're not running, and conversely encouraging them to help us in districts where we're running and they aren't. I think there's far more for us to be gained in alliance than in trying to push us all together into one organization.
Okay. Your social media is on fleek. You said that you've gotten a lot of support recently on social media, that you had a lot of growth. Are posts like this part of the reason you're getting that growth? Are you waking people up? What's happening here?
Yeah, so my social media is a combination of stuff like this, basically laying bare without any of the partisanship, just laying bare. This is what your government's doing to you. Okay. And one of the most viral posts that's ever been made by a libertarian was one where I simply put up, I said $600 times 328 million is $196.8 billion. This stimulus bill is for $900 billion. Where do you think that $700 billion is going to? And that ended up having a reach of 120 million. It reached 1 out of every 3 Americans probably saw that tweet or that post on Facebook or that post on Instagram. And it was just because I was laying very, very simple truth without getting into Republicans and Democrats and Trump and Biden. And if you don't support this, then you must support that. I just said, hey, look at what they're doing to you. So I do a lot of emperors, has no clothes type stuff. I try to have my social media as just me perpetually getting up and pointing at the emperor and saying, hey, that guy's naked. And then everyone looks, oh, wow, he is naked, isn't he? And then I also have, a lot of memes and jokes and stuff like that. But for the most part, my social media is pretty much just exposing the excesses and abuses of government without getting caught up in the partisanship. And without fail, people will show up and go, yeah, well, Snyder, sure, he did stuff wrong, but, those Democrats in the Flint City Council, they did wrong too. And I'm like, yeah, no, they should definitely be prosecuted too. Or they'll go,
right.
Obama. Obama was getting briefed on it, and where's his punishment? Yeah, no, they should. Obama, if we can show Obama should absolutely be punished as well. And frankly, they should be punished just as bad or worse than Snyder was. I mean, $1,000 on that post, $1,000 fine for covering up something for a year that resulted in the deaths of at least 12 people, not to mention the mental, health problems that are happening for thousands of residents of Flint, and an ongoing problem that's they're still in the process of working out. He covered that up for at least a year that we know of. Now, if you or I or Conrad covered something like that up for a year and it resulted in 12 people dying, that would be called negligent homicide. But when a government official, someone who is put in a position of actually protecting us from things, does exactly that, it's called willful neglect of duty. And instead of it being something that you go to jail for many, many, many years, you get 2 misdemeanors and $1,000 fine.
That reminds me of the situation where some of our first responders, our beautiful officers that we respect and love, took custody of somebody. And while they took custody of that person who was placed in the back of a paddy wagon, they were damaged. Now, if I took custody of somebody, a child, anybody, an older person, and in the time that they were in my custody, they were damaged, I'd be in jail.
That's Freddie Gray in Baltimore.
Yeah, I knew it was Freddie. I was trying to remember the last name. Yeah.
Right. So
and this is from the Baltimore PD. And by the way, I'm originally from Baltimore, and we are refugees from Baltimore. We fled in 1988. But the Baltimore Police Department, who is routinely caught planting drugs and guns on their suspects, on people that they're giving a hard time to, and I mean, like, literally on camera, they actually gave body cams to police officers in Baltimore, but they didn't tell them that it started recording about 40 or 50 seconds before, like, it started holding the recording of what they pressed of at the time that they pressed it. And so they didn't know that. So they caught dozens of instances of them just straight up walking over, taking a gun out of their pocket or taking cocaine out of their pocket and planting it somewhere and then turning on the camera.
And the friends of the police, the FOP, whatever they, and they're backing that. They back that BS. So, they want us to back the bull, but they're backing BS. We need to back justice.
Yeah. Well, and they'll say stuff like, well, who are you going to call when you get, broken into or someone's attacking? Well, not them, because they're going to show up and plant coke on me. So, they say, next time call a crackhead. Yeah, I'll do that, because for $10, crackhead will probably protect me. Right. So this is the thing. And keep in mind what they're saying here. When they're talking about this stuff, they're saying the police are, we want to be protected. We do want to be protected. This isn't working. And it's especially not working for poor people, for homeless people, for people of color, for gender and sexual minorities, for ethnic, racial, and religious minorities, for immigrants. It certainly isn't working, and frankly, it's not working for anyone unless you're very wealthy and powerful. So why would we continue that system? I want, when people see the police, to be relieved, because they know that the only reason that police officer is there is to protect their lives and rights and property. That's it. That they're not there to give them a $300 fine for a busted taillight that ruins them financially for weeks and months. That they're not there to, either plant something or even take a substance from them that they voluntarily chose to consume themselves or give to someone else or sell to someone else, and put them in a cage for basically doing what Big Pharma does every day, who isn't there to infringe on their rights and then walk away scot-free because of qualified immunity, that isn't there to break down their door and kill them if we dare to shoot at people that just broke into our home without telling us who they are. That's not there to harm us, but is there to protect us, or at the very least to stop people and punish people who are actually harming people. And the only way we can do that is by getting rid of laws against victimless crimes, and holding bad actors, not just police officers, but also judges and prosecutors and politicians accountable, stripping them of their immunity so that when they do something wrong, they're held every bit as accountable as you and I would be.
That's why you got to remember that defund the police is not a disbanding movement. It's a police reform movement, and it may have got misbranded, but you got to remember that the idea is government reform, and this is something conservatives should actually look at both for budget-wise and just good government.
Defund the police is what we have in nice communities, where there is a police force who is there specifically just to protect people that are there, and where any other resources that are being spent by government are being spent on things people need, like health, mental health, early intervention for children and so forth. And here's how you achieve that, Conrad. Mm-hmm. Instead of having people hundreds or thousands of miles away deciding what you need, putting that money and that power and that ability to make decisions back in the hands of the people that live in those communities to decide what their schools look like, what their police departments look like, what their first responders look like, what their streets look like, what their parks look like, what their community looks like, armed and empowered with their money back that was stolen from them. Because if you leave it up to someone that's thousands or hundreds of miles away, even if they are operating solely on good faith, they can't possibly know what every single community needs, as well as the people that actually live in that community. And of course, we know that they often are not operating in good faith. They get into those positions of power to be able to make all these decisions so that they can hand off money to the people who paid for them to get into office and make them wealthy and enrich themselves in the process. We just had a race for the Senate, two races for Senate in Georgia. Over $1 billion was spent on that race from the two major parties in those two races. Mm-hmm. The salaries for these jobs are like $160,000 a year or $200,000 a year or something like that. Why if $1 billion is spent to try to get a job that has like six-figure pay, then other favors are being done after the fact, and that is the problem.
I also want to briefly touch on the fact that we brought in the stimulus spending and how it was gone out of the country for a lot of the things, but we also touched on Flint. Stimulus spending did not go to Flint.
Nope.
And it hasn't for over 8 years.
Yep. Well, yep.
And
they have slowly been, they know what the problem is. We all know what the problem is. Bad pipe systems were utilized that had been condemned decades before, because instead of continuing to buy water from the Detroit Water Board, they decided to make their own system so that Rick Snyder could create a jobs program where they would create a new way of bringing water into Flint and other nearby cities, even though at no point did they say that it would actually save anyone money. It was always going to be cheaper to get money from the Detroit Water Bureau or Commission or whatever it was called. And they have more than enough water to be able to sell. But no, they had to create a jobs program. And when that jobs program was falling behind, they said, okay, well, we'll just have to put the water through those old pipes that got condemned back before any of us were alive. And surprise, surprise, people started getting freaking Legionnaire's disease because of pipes that had been ruled substandard decades ago that were then just sitting there in the ground, not being used. Certainly they got better during that time. And as a result, literal brown water was coming out of some of these pipes. And even in the areas where the water was clear, it was seeping mineral content from these pipes that were poorly and shoddily made decades ago and then were sitting there. So it turned out that there was an anti-leaching agent that they could have put in the water. And it would have cost, I think, a few $1,000s a day. Like, it would have been very cheap to put this in the water. And even after they found out that they should be putting this stuff in the water, they didn't. Because they didn't have to. Because the people who were being harmed didn't know it. And even once they found out, they didn't have the economic ability or the social and institutional power to challenge it. And we're still facing that now. That would not have happened in other nearby communities in other wealthier and whiter communities in Michigan. And this is, a lot of times when I say this, people go, it's not about race. It isn't about race, except to the people who are doing it to people because they don't have the power to fight back. That's who it's about race to.
On terms of strategy, we didn't name it, but we touched on the concept of small L libertarianism, where you are a libertarian probably personally, and then you join a party to try to make inroads to progress. And I want to expand on that small L concept. Seko is famous for saying that he supports policy over party. So we're not wedded to blindly support any party. Now, for small L libertarians, the ones who join a larger party to work from inside, they typically join their local Republican Party. Libertarians do not like laws on migrants, for instance. So Democrat presidential candidate Julian Castro wanted to decriminalize non-citizen immigrants. Libertarians do not like laws on recreational drug use. Democrat candidates and state legislators and some national Dems were slowly pushing for that, at least on marijuana. Here in Virginia, we're doing that this year. And Oregon trying out major drug decriminalization, statewide. And libertarians, for instance, are for full LGBTQ rights, as you may notice, a theme that they're leading the way on this. Republican Congressman Denver Riggleman of Virginia was kicked out of his local Republican Party, and Leslie lost his campaign to run in 2020 because he officiated a gay wedding. The Democrats are the comparative big two party advancing those specific rights. So is joining the Democrat Party in terms of small L libertarianism equally palatable to libertarians as joining the Republican Party?
I think it's equally palatable, especially considering I think it has more to do strategically with who dominates the region that you're running in. I think it's also equally a dead end. We've seen what happens when people join the Republican and Democrat parties with the hopes of changing it from within or pulling people into libertarianism from it. They either end up getting frustrated and leaving, they end up being kicked out, or they end up having to conform with the system to be able to have a hope of having anything done. And I think that it is ultimately a dead end. I do not condemn anyone who tries to do that. We all have different ways of trying to do things. My focus right now is on growing this party, the Libertarian Party, to being a force where people don't have to make that bargain of going for, joining one of the Republican parties and hoping that they can try to get things done within the confines of that. I want to grow this party. I actually, when I was in Reopen Cal Now, I was speaking on the way to the rally that we had at Capitol Hill, and I was speaking to a young man who just recently became the chair of his local county Republican Party, and he said, I agree with the Libertarians more than Republicans. There are so many things I don't agree with Republicans on. I consider myself a Libertarian, but Libertarians can't win in my district, so I'm trying to do it within the Republican Party. And I said, I get that, but I want to grow the Libertarian. I'm working right now to grow the Libertarian Party so you don't have to do that. And that's really my answer to that, is whether you are more likely to do that within the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. I certainly am not going to condemn you or tell you to stop. I am definitely going to tell you that it is a dead end road, and I'm going to be working to make this party the force that supplants those two and allows people to no longer have to make that choice of principle over pragmatism, and be able to go with the party that is both the most principled and most in line with what they want, and also the most likely to win.
So let's sort of circle back to local libertarian politics, statewide libertarian politics, and locally, the 757's libertarian movement has sort of developed a bit of a headache. I could call it that. There's been a group called the Tidewater Libertarian Party for about 20 years, led by even a former city councilman, Robert Dean. Over the past couple of years, a notable amount of newer members to the TLP have joined. They've paid their dues. They worked hours to get Libertarian Party candidates elected, created signs, flyers, sponsored Second Amendment rallies, the stuff that you want them to do.
Right.
Veteran members of the group were a little bit more, again, I'm going to use my own terminology here. They're Republicans who don't like sitting in a room with the Republican Party of Virginia Beach type people, but nonetheless Republican. There's Trump and Trump memorabilia. It's big in the TLP. They endorsed Daniel Gade for Senate in 2020. He's a Republican. The newer members recently sought to call a business meeting to call for new TLP elections, but powers that be scuttled the parliamentary process and invited all the new members to depart the party with their dues and form their own. To many of the more libertarian diehards in Virginia, a local libertarian affiliate should support the state party and support state and national candidates like yourself.
Yes.
If it isn't being done, they're believing that trying to affiliate with the Libertarian Party of Virginia should cease. So Spike, in the vein of all politics is local, and you being a tremendous advocate for libertarianism wherever you go, including here in Virginia, how do you think local libertarian affiliates should conduct themselves?
I think that if and I can't speak to this specific issue because I'm not I don't know the details. I literally only know what you just told me, but based just solely on what you said, if a local libertarian affiliate is not actively working to help libertarians both locally at the local and state and national level, and if they're finding themselves drifting towards one of the other parties or even another third party, but not actually working to get libertarians elected and to promote libertarian ideas, then I believe that the members that are within that affiliate should disband and create a new one. And I believe that the state should no longer recognize the charter of that local affiliate. And it's not to say that the people, because a lot of people say to me, "Oh, I thought you think people should be free to say what they want." Absolutely, but they don't deserve. Our banner is specific to our platform, our state platforms and our national platform. And if you're not keeping with the actual platform and beliefs of our party, then there is no reason that we should continue to allow you to use our brand and to use our resources when you're clearly funneling it to another party. Again, I am going based on what Conrad just said. I do not know all the particulars with the Tidewater LP. I don't want to get Tidewater LP. Don't send me angry calls and say that I don't know the whole story. You're right. I don't know the whole story. But I will just say in general that local affiliates need to be supporting the Libertarian Party. And if they're not, then they should be replaced with affiliates who are.
Are you ready to go into policy now? We're
Sure.
ready to do our policy questions now. And for what it's worth, constitutionalism and libertarianism are actually kind of mutually exclusive. For instance, constitutionalism gives Congress power to encourage and promote the general welfare. That's very broad. And how it does so greatly strikes the ire of many political parties, not just the libertarians, but libertarians chiefly among them. This brings me to healthcare, which is probably the biggest reason why I'm now a progressive Democrat as opposed to the libertarian that I was from 2008 to 2016. I'll use my brother as a personal example. He's dealing with about a $1,300 doctor bill from December. The reason my nephew needed his blood drawn and some lab work. 10 minutes with the doctor was $347. Two distinct tests on the blood to see if he's allergic to gluten. Each one was $101. My brother's family plan, which is about $480 a month, is his premium. He has about $125 that goes towards a healthcare savings account. He has about a $5,000 deductible. He hadn't used his deductible up by December, so all of this was out of pocket. So compare and contrast with my girlfriend's father's bill. He has a veteran, so he's injured years ago in a shooting. He can't use his legs. All his lab work, the Veterans Administration pays for. When he needed hospital visits, the VA pays for. When he needed medicine, the VA pays for. Yes, he, I, you, Seko, everyone pays taxes. But we see just how easy that process was for him. Remember, the Veterans Administration's healthcare plan is pretty much pure socialism. The government owns the land. Government owns the buildings, government owns the medicine, owns the devices, government pays the doctors. The drawbacks are the wait times, which is basically a supply side problems, not demand side. Right. I stump for Medicare for all, as Bernie Sanders would, and he wants to take away premiums and deductibles inherent with the current Medicare system, expand it to everybody, which that's surely going to raise our taxes, even my taxes. And I'm below a $30,000 a year guy. So what do we get with the marginal increase in taxes? Allegedly, we get universal coverage, reforming of pricing. It eliminates the scam inherent to the current system where everybody is price gouging everyone following it up with so much administrative fees. By
Mhm.
by definition, circling back to the general welfare,
Mhm.
Medicare for all is sort of a balance between the more left-wing idea of Veterans Administration healthcare for all, which allows still private hospitals and providers and drug companies to all remain
Mhm.
private but operate on equal paying field, rooting out the gouging that skyrockets our prices.
Mm, yeah.
Don't pay out of pocket, allegedly, that's a selling point. And point of healthcare provision is free at the point of consuming it. You merely have your income taxes changed. That's me, a progressive in
Okay.
the 757, looking to greatly advocate for healthcare reform so
Mhm.
myself, family, community can prosper without fear of bankruptcy. You are a great advocate for libertarianism, and I, the Beach Brothers Show, we want you to tackle health reform in the best way you know how right now.
Yes, absolutely. So you are 100% correct. Medicare for all is the worst of both worlds. You are preserving the corporate structure and the regulations inherent in it that cause the cost of healthcare to rise in the first place. And you are removing any bit of cost control that happens by people actually paying out of pocket by now just solely putting it in the hands of the government, thereby ensuring that it continues to skyrocket out of control. And instead of you paying for it directly, you're paying for it in taxes, and future generations that aren't even born yet are now paying the overflow for that, eventually leading to a system whereby some future generation both has to pay the bill and is not able to afford continue sustaining that system. So now they're paying out of pocket as well. Here's the problem with why healthcare is so expensive in this country. You mentioned the situation with your brother and his children and what led to that. We can thank the government cost plus model for that. So in order to try to reduce costs, the government said that in order to be able to reduce costs, that hospitals and doctors' offices could only charge a percentage more than they themselves are paying for that product, so that we can save costs. Well, here's what happened. A bag of saline costs pennies to make, including the bag. And you can sell a bag of saline in a free market system right now for about $2 to $5, depending on the area, unless you're in the cost plus model. Because if I'm a doctor and I know I can only charge, say, 10% more than the cost of that saline bag, and I have two suppliers in front of me, one of them says, I'm going to sell you this saline bag for $5, which means you can charge $5.50 for it. And another saline bag supplier says, I can charge you this saline bag for $700, and you can charge $770 and keep that $70. I, as a doctor, through the cost plus model, have been incentivized to buy that $700 bag of saline. And because the customer is not the final payer very often, and it's being filtered through a model of insurance first, and all the bureaucracy that's built into that, which also drives up the cost. I have more reason to drive up costs on my end, as you put it, on the supply side as possible, so I can make more money. That also works as a kickback towards the entire cottage industry that has been built around that. The suppliers, the insurance companies, the pharmaceutical companies, all of the people that make more money because of a system that would not otherwise exist if government wasn't involved. Now, what Medicare for All does is says, we're going to take that and remove the part where someone's at least paying out of pocket, which puts some level of price control in. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to have the government pay the whole thing so that no one even really knows what it costs when they're running up services. This healthcare system is an absolute joke. And the answer is to undo what's been done, not double down on it and make it worse. We need to get rid of protections for big pharma, patent protections for drugs that have been around longer than any of us have been alive, things that cost pennies in many other countries and should cost pennies here. We need to get rid of laws against importing drugs into this country. It is your body. You should be able to put whatever you want in it. We need to end the war on drugs, which allows people to use things like cannabis, which is far more effective, has far fewer side effects, and is far cheaper than the solutions for pain and mental issues that big pharma proposes. We need to get rid of the insurance system altogether, not by passing any laws, but by simply getting rid of the laws that created and incentivized comprehensive health insurance in the first place. Comprehensive health insurance is not a market-derived plan. It was actually a way to get around wage controls that were implemented by the FDR administration and led to the system that we have now. We need to get rid of cost plus. If I'm a doctor and I'm now no longer having to run it through this, or I'm a hospital and I'm no longer running it through this labyrinthian healthcare system, this labyrinthian maze work of insurance regulations and state and federal regulations, and instead I'm just selling something to you. Now there's a price equilibrium. I can only charge what people could afford, or I'm not going to have any customers. Now, and you said, what did you say, Conrad? Well, everyone's getting stuff for free in the VA. We just have a supply side problem. Yeah, because there's no incentivization of having more providers into that system. When you require a price equilibrium, now all of a sudden there's way more supply, because I as a doctor, or I as a hospital administrator, or I as the person who is making the supply side decisions on bringing in the services and goods that I need to then provide to my consumers, which in this case are patients, I now have incentivized to find as many providers as possible and to be much more discerning in what I'm spending. Now, instead of trying to find the most expensive bag of saline humanly possible, I know that I can only charge X for a bag of saline. So I got to go find someone who can give me that bag of saline for as little as possible while still providing the actual quality and value that I need to be able to effectively provide saline. So much of what is happening is not, many people believe the reason that the cost of healthcare has gone up is because of all the innovation that's happened in the market. That's the opposite. It's actually the costs that have made the innovation happen at a slower pace, because more money is being spent on saline instead of being spent on actual research for things that could give us better health outcomes. So our proposal is this, and it not only fixes the problem of healthcare costs today, it not only fixes the problem of healthcare costs that are hidden in things like the VA and Medicare and Medicaid, it also creates a sustainable system that doesn't saddle people who aren't even born yet with tens or hundreds of trillions of dollars in unfunded mandates. And that system is to get the cronies out of the system that we have now and allow for the natural price equilibrium that happens when the only people involved in a given commercial transaction are the provider and the consumer. When you go and get a chicken sandwich, imagine if instead of getting a chicken, right now the way you get a chicken sandwich is you go, I can go to Popeyes, I can go to Chick-fil-A, I can go to McDonald's, and this is what these chicken sandwiches cost, and this one's a little bit better than this one, and you go in and you get your chicken sandwich. And these providers, there's no law on price gouging for chicken sandwiches. The reason that they charge what they do is because they know that if it's not a value enough for you, then you'll get it somewhere else, right? So, and this is food. We say, oh, well, healthcare is necessary. We're talking about food. You will die if you don't eat today. Well, maybe not today. You will die if you don't eat this week. So this is clearly something that is necessary, right? So there's some people that could actually go a week without eating, but we won't talk about that. But imagine if instead of the system that we have now for chicken sandwiches, imagine if we had comprehensive chicken sandwich insurance. You pay a fixed amount of money per month for the chicken sandwiches that you're going to need in the future. And in order to try to keep the cost down for those chicken sandwiches, those chicken sandwich providers can only charge you about 10% of what it costs for them to get to procure the things that they need for that chicken sandwich. Now, all of a sudden, chickens cost $1,500. Now, all of a sudden, bread costs $150 a loaf. Now, all of a sudden, all this stuff is way more expensive because they're only getting to skim from the top of what their costs are. And now, because of the labyrinthian insurance system that they now have to run every chicken sandwich transaction through, it now drives up the cost. You go into your chicken sandwich store and you go, let me get a chicken sandwich with cheese. How much is that? And they go, I don't know. What insurance do you have? I have Blue Cross Blue Chicken. Here you go. And they go, okay, yeah. This is the Blue Cross Blue Chicken HMO model. We're going to have to run this through. We'll send you a bill. We'll find out what they cover, and then we'll send you a bill based on your chicken sandwich network. What on earth makes anyone think this is going to be more expensive? Now, imagine if because of this system, no one can afford chicken sandwiches anymore. It's costing a freaking fortune. The vast majority of Americans have to actually have subsidized chicken sandwich insurance and still can't afford it. And so Colonel Sanders comes in and says, listen, I have a fix for this. We are going to have chicken sandwiches for all. We're going to fix it right we're now going to, from now on, we're at Blue Cross Blue Chicken. I came up with that just now. And we're going to, and now we're going to provide chicken sandwiches to everyone, whoever needs it. And we're going to put the very people who created the regulations that drove up the cost to their direct benefit in charge of deciding what it's going to cost. Now, you're no longer paying for the chicken sandwich yourself, but that same suboptimal way of providing you with that sandwich exists. There is so much money being put directly into bureaucracy and into profit instead of into actual research and dynamic creation of ways to bring down the cost to equilibrium so that they get your business instead of someone else. So that now chicken sandwiches are pretty much in stasis. There's not going to be any improvements to the seasoning. It's going to be the same herbs and spices. If you don't like your chicken sandwiches now, that's tough. That's how they're always going to be. And we're creating billions of dollars in additional costs for people that haven't even been born yet, because screw them, they're not born yet. We talk about taxation without representation because if you're able to tax someone who has no say in the matter, that is an inherent injustice. Our system of running up debt on people who haven't even been born yet is the worst kind of taxation without representation. It is a taxation whereby the very moment that person is born, we go, hey, you're going to be paying off about 80 grand as it stands right now. Congratulations. And we have to end that system. We have to end it for education. We have to end it for healthcare. We have to end it for everything. Everything gets fixed when we take the power out of the hands of the cronies and put it back in the hands of the people where it always belongs.
Wow. All right. Wow. Aaron says, I wish everyone would listen to you speak, Spike. Our country would be in a much better place. Eric says he wants his chicken fried. Yo, hashtag Blue Cross Blue Chicken. Yo, Conrad, speaking of spending money.
Yeah, I was about to say that it's notable that the healthcare industry is at 1 out of every $5 in the United States, but cars are not 1 out of every $5 in the United States. And if you want to get yourself a nice, inexpensive, good quality car, you have a good bet to go down to Chesapeake, Virginia, 1248 South Military Highway, and go to Southern Greenbrier. Get yourself a Volkswagen like I have. Speak with Charlie Roy and secure yourself a nice car to at least take you to the hospital, or perhaps pass the chicken place and use your Blue Cross Blue Chicken sheet on card to get yourself a nice chicken sandwich.
Nice chicken sandwich.
Oh, that's hilarious. That's hilarious. We also want to shout out commonsenseforyou.org. Commonsenseforyou.org. Now, we've learned that health isn't only what you put inside your body, it's what you put on your body. So if you want to make sure that your skin is beautiful, radiant, and that your health is beautiful and radiant, make sure you go to commonsenseforyou.org. That's commonsenseforyou.org. And I'm Seko, Varner with Positive Vibes Financial. I provide real estate investors with monies. So if you're a real estate investor, I can provide you or help provide you with 90% of the acquisition costs and 100% of the rehab costs. 90% of the acquisition costs and 100% of the rehab costs. So make sure you get in contact with me, and make sure you get that great Volkswagen from Volkswagen Greenbrier. Whew, Spike, you've been on fire, man. You've been on fire. You've been on fire. So the 757 wants you to come speak to the Libertarian Party of Hampton Roads. Hope I said that right.
I would be happy to. I would love to do it. I would love to do it. I was in, I don't know, I think it's still general area. When I was in Newport News, that's somewhat near Hampton Roads, right?
Right. That's across the bay, yeah.
Yeah, we actually went that was a stop that we had on the bus tour. And I've also done some events with Black Lives Matter 757. We were actually in Richmond for the event that I did with Black Lives Matter 757. We spoke at the Capitol, and yeah, there it is right there. And interestingly enough, we talk about, it's a very common phrase, and it's true that all lives can't matter until Black Lives Matter. And I say that we can't say that Black Lives Matter if Black people are not able to effectively defend themselves. And we have seen that the war on drugs always started as a way to disarm people of color and make them unable to be able to protect themselves. The very first gun control laws in this country were laws that were written to stop freed slaves from being able to own guns, both through actually straight up prohibiting them from owning certain types of weapons, and also through laws that drove up the cost of producing guns, knowing that it would make it unaffordable for the majority of African Americans at that time. And to this day, every single gun law on the books is wildly disproportionately used against people of color. You think that drug laws are disproportionately enforced against people of color? The war on guns is on a completely different level. So people of color are something like half as likely to own a firearm as a white person, and yet they are 7 to 8 times more likely to be convicted on a drug charge or on a gun charge. And if they get, and when I say a gun charge, I don't mean using a gun in the furtherance of a crime. I mean owning a weapon that they're not supposed to have. Just owning a weapon, no actual other crime other than just owning that weapon. And if and when a white person and a black person in a similar situation are convicted of a gun crime, that black person is likely to get many times, I think 6 or 7 times higher sentencing, literally getting 6 to 7 years for every year that the white person gets. So when we talk about keeping communities safe, that is, we talk about dog whistles. When we are telling largely suburban white soccer moms that we need to keep our community safe with gun control, the message there is very clear, and so is the implementation. Exactly.
You also mentioned a little while ago on another question, we were naming off some names, and Crawford was the guy in Walmart who happened to be carrying a weapon. It was just simply shot dead. Tamir Rice, it only took seconds. The cop got out of the car and shot him, and that was a toy. You can't have a right to a gun if simply exposing your right is going to get you killed on the street before you have any due process.
Yep. In fact, there was a young man, and I forget his name. He just recently was killed in Columbus, Ohio, and he legally owned a weapon.
Right.
He legally owned a weapon, and he was killed for legally owned, and he didn't present it, but they saw it and they thought he was going for it.
And he didn't have it on him.
Yeah, no, he didn't have it on him. Yeah,
he didn't have it on him. He had his cell phone.
That's right.
Look,
he showed him the cell phone on the video.
I grew up in Columbus, Ohio. Was just there recently, a few weeks ago, and it saddens me. But unfortunately, that was the experience that we had with those who were, protecting and serving others in Columbus, Ohio.
Yep. There was shortly after the shooting in Connecticut that led to sweeping gun control in many states. There was a single mother, a black woman who was a single mother who was driving through New Jersey with her legally owned and licensed firearm. And she was pulled over by the police for a traffic violation. And she volunteered to the police. By the way, I was told when I got my CC permit that, when I get pulled over, that I should let you know that I own a firearm. And they said, what state do you own it in? And I believe it was Virginia. It may have been another state. And they said, well, we don't have reciprocity with Virginia. You're under arrest. And she was in jail pending a trial for a gun crime. Now, thankfully, there was so much public groundswell against it that the governor at the time, Chris Christie, gave her a pardon and she was let go. But this is how, there it is right there. This is how gun laws get used. They don't get used against drug kingpins. They don't get used against the people who are actually committing massive gun. They're being used against people who don't have the institutional or economic ability to fight back against being disproportionately harmed by the enforcement of laws. Because the whole purpose of all these laws is to put lots and lots and lots of people in jail. That's the purpose of these laws, to use them for labor and to make money for the lobbyists in the cottage industry that's built around prisons, the suppliers, the contractors, the corrections officers unions, all of the people that are making freaking fortunes off of the caging of people who didn't hurt anyone.
I mean, that's all true. I have about 2 more questions that are prepared before I think it's about time for we wrap up yourself. And you're busy enough. You're about to go into another podcast anyway.
Yeah, I got another thing at 8. So yeah. Okay.
So the first one will be kind of lengthy in my description of it. It's national. Then we're going to switch up and do one thing local, but it circles around libertarianism. And
Sure.
Let's first tackle the recent U.S. Capitol siege by basically it looked like Trump protesters. It's the most jarring political image that I've seen in the past 2 months at least, and it led to the president being the first one ever impeached twice. Now, you had a post. This is another one of the great posts of yours that gets picked up and is shown around around the country. And your premise, as it was happening, was that there was a great deal of similarities between the protest of Black Lives Matter and the Trump insurrection. Because
between the root causes behind what leads people to do things like that. But go ahead. Yes.
Yeah, I was going to say it's because of economic anxiety. It's lost jobs, low income, costs of living. You've reduced it down to people who are happy and comfortable don't riot. And I want to sort of take the opportunity to object without, attacking you here, but sort of properly frame this in a way that I thought it should be viewed. We all agree that anxiety is present. However, a Black Lives Matter protest and, say, a Trump election loss protest are anxious, but for differing reasons. Black Lives Matter protests are towards systemic injustice, played out in real time. They would see a video of a death and a lack of a prosecution or an outright exoneration, and it creates anger. It's a different anger felt in the soul that society's view of Black and brown people are collectively valued less than the white counterparts in criminal justice. And you've partly explained as to why. The Trump Capitol protests were certainly violent in their own way, but their violence was more for the Trump cause, that they believed the election of their candidate was stolen from them. And I think that that's a different anger. It's more cultural. The crowd was considerably wider than a Black Lives Matter protest. It had scores of military members in it, scores of police officers in it. Many of them traveled out of state to do it. The guy in the House chamber with zip ties, he was a former Air Force colonel. These are people that have money to bus or fly to the Capitol. They often stayed in pretty high-rated hotels. This is more of a upper middle class affair for that particular group. And I'm going to just point to December that the U.S. economy lost 140,000 jobs. Gainers overall were men. Over 150,000 lost jobs were from women. Men made up enough to drop the net total to about 140,000. And white women gained jobs overall in the time period, which means Black and brown women were pretty much the majority of the losses. It would be worth noting that the people feeling the most economic pain in this relative Trump economy before it converts to Biden are the people who would be protesting at Black Lives Matter, and not that they were being fired in 2020. Trump protesters are upset over wearing a mask, possible Biden tax hikes, the boogeyman of socialism, even from a Joe Manchin type Democrat. They have that draped under a stance of a conspiracy was made to steal their candidate's win, and it isn't possible he simply was outvoted. And this is from the crowd most socially and economically insulated from the pain of the modern economy. This circles back to that particular premise you had as it was happening. Of course, it's been over a week now. Maybe you've changed your opinion a little bit. I just want to give you this chance to reflect on the similarities that you may still see as to why the groups might be protesting. Just give us your words.
Right. So this is actually part of a larger tweet thread where I talk about the fact that the people that are protesting in D.C. are protesting under false pretenses, and they're protesting on behalf of someone who helped and played a part in putting them in the situation that they're currently in. So I certainly was not trying to compare the actual immediate reasons for the Trump protests and riots to the immediate reasons for the Black Lives Matter protests and riots. What I said is that, and I will say it again, happy and comfortable people who think that things are going well, do not riot. They typically do not riot. And the reason they don't riot is because why would you put yourself and others that you care about at risk if things are largely going okay? And so when we look at, and we have to go even further than when we're talking about the Trump protesters and rioters, we have to go beyond why were they rioting and why were they protesting. We have to go beyond why would they think that this election was, rigged, because many of them believed that, that this election was rigged and fraudulent? Why would they believe a con man with a decades long history of selling people the moon and stars, only to walk away from everything scot free when it all inevitably falls apart, and just blame everyone else for it and not take any personal responsibility for it? What put them in a position of even falling for the tactics and rhetoric of such a huckster to begin with? What would make them so able to do that? When I just went around the country campaigning for vice president, I went to 35 states, over 70 campaign stops, something like 75 campaign stops, talked with tens of thousands of people across this country, people that were white, people that were black, people that were all different races and colors and creeds, all different religions, all different economic levels, all different geosocial situations, urban people, rural people, suburban people, and everything in between. And what I overwhelmingly heard from everyone was that the cost of living is spiraling out of control. Their ability to be able to make ends meet is increasingly difficult. Their ability to be able to gain in either getting gainful employment or getting more money for what they're currently doing continues to get worse and worse and harder. Their prospects for their children's future and education and higher education is continuing to get more and more bleak and more expensive at the same time. They are seeing increased anxiety and division around them in their communities, and on every front that one can measure and assign a metric to it, the misery in this country is getting worse and worse and worse, slowly and steadily. And it's happening for systemic reasons. It's happening because the people that are in office, that are in charge, including Donald Trump, want it to be that way. They want us to be increasingly hopeless, and they want us to be increasingly desperate, because it's that much easier for them to sell us on their con game. It's easier for them to tell us, I'm your ally, and that guy over there that I work with every day, he's your enemy. And it's easy for that guy to do the same thing with other groups of people and say, I'm your ally and that guy's your enemy. It's easier for them to play their good cop, bad cop routine if we are dealing with fear and anxiety and anger and resentment and a series and a feeling of hopelessness. That is what leads people to follow these types of demagogues. That is what leads to people to be able to do these types of things. So until we address the concerns of why people even got how do you find yourself protesting that a reality show TV star lost his election? It's all of the things that happen as a result of that. And until we address the root causes of that, if we continue to call these people, ignorant, racist deplorables, and if people on this side continue to look at the Black Lives Matter people, and instead of looking at the root causes behind why they're doing what they're doing, call them spoiled and entitled and violent and thugs and whatever, then we can stay nice and divided that way and get absolutely nothing accomplished except for the continued enrichment of incredibly powerful and cynical people who care nothing about any of us. Or we can actually look at our common causes and recognize that they're the ones that put us in that situation, and kick them out of office so they can never do anything like that to us again.
All right. I want to wrap up under one local question based on local government, and wrap it up with the idea of how libertarianism interjects. The Virginia Beach Development Authority just put forth a program for Atlantic Avenue businesses. It provided you own less than 3 businesses on Atlantic and employ less than 50 people, you qualify. The program is storefront revitalization. If you do improvements this year, you'll be eligible for up to a $10,000 grant to do that. And it's not United States federal government money. It's not state of Virginia money. It's Virginia Beach tax dollars set up from an authority that is bureaucratic and without accountability to the taxpayer. The money is only allotted to be roughly $100,000. So at the limit, 10 businesses could get that $10,000. I assume that some businesses may take less than that, some not at all. It circles back to several themes a libertarian like you can tackle, like municipal taxation, municipal spending, business grants, economic revitalization, and the kicker, considering why Virginia Beach is even doing this, COVID responses. Atlantic Avenue was hit hard by COVID, and tourism is one of the 3 pillars of the Virginia Beach economy. So, Mr. Spike, as you close out to address the audience of Eastern Virginia, what are your opinion on those various themes?
Because God knows that the reason that there's such economic devastation to, it was Atlantic Avenue. to Atlantic Avenue during a pandemic and a series of lockdowns, it's definitely because the storefronts aren't nice looking enough. So this is a perfect example of what happens when you allow government to take money from you for what they think is a good idea. In no way does anyone think that this is going to actually solve anything. What this is going to do, and I guarantee you, when many years from now, it's going to be revealed that they already knew who those 10 businesses were, and they already knew who the supplier was going to be, and to do this revitalization. And this was just a sop of $100,000 to some people that help get people into office. And I live just outside of the city of Myrtle Beach, and I certainly would never live within the city limits of Myrtle Beach because they do that kind of nonsense too. And we have multiple revitalization efforts where, they created these beautiful stucco storefronts, and the businesses continue to go dormant and go out of business because the reason people aren't going to those areas is because they're unsafe and the cost of doing business there is way too expensive. So things cost too much there to begin with. That's what the problem is. So the way you revitalize things economically is get government the hell out of the way of private industry. Like, there is politicians who have already demonstrated that they have not done a good job actually making money by providing value to people should be the absolute last people we should be looking for to these solutions. I mean, you said it yourself. It's going to be bureaucratically driven. I guarantee you they already have an idea of who's going to get that money, and it ain't you. 10 businesses like that, they might as well have called it the bribing the 10 guys who made sure I got reelected act. Like, that's it. It's nonsense. This is and it also drives home the fact that so much of the tyranny, we focus on the federal level. We focus on federal tyranny and federal corruption. Most corruption and tyranny happens a matter of miles away from where you live. It's in your backyard. Remember, it's not federal agents who are the likely ones to come and infringe on your rights and harass you. It's your local and state police. It's the cops that are going to do this. So we need to recognize that, like, just because something is local doesn't necessarily mean it's better if they're still doing things the same way it's being done at the top, which is why my belief is that we need to bring things back as much as possible to the individual and community level. Instead of it being decided for an entire city that exists because they're a political they created a political subdivision for themselves, and they decided they claimed authority over it. Let people in individual communities empowered with their own money and power and freedom and decision-making ability to be able to make decisions for what their community looks like. Because what do you want to bet that if that immediate community where Atlantic Avenue is in, or those stores that are in Atlantic Avenue, if those were the people who were solely responsible for the decision-making and the funding and the direction of that, they would no sooner ever consider, let's take $100,000 from us and let's make some stucco storefronts during a pandemic. That's the problem. That's the solution. The solutions will come much more intuitively when they come from people who are empowered and are making decisions with their money and their freedom to decide how to best move forward on a given thing.
Going to clap it up. Handled it very well. Glad you're able to come back again, Mr. Spike. This was
and I had internet this time. My internet worked this time.
Yes, very good. I enjoyed it. We were able to talk about the good stuff. And so you're about to do your podcast. I want to let you go and prepare for that. I just want to thank you again for wanting to come back onto our show. And we're going to keep watching you, and hopefully you do come back around Virginia Beach ways and speak to Libertarian Party Hampton Roads.
I would love to do that. Seko, Conrad, or Coolrad, I'm sorry. Thank you guys so much for having me on. And folks, if you want to find out more about libertarianism, I invite you to follow me on my social media. I am Spike Cohen, SPIKECOHEN. I am on Facebook. I am on YouTube. I am on Instagram. I'm on TikTok for the kids. I don't do a lot on TikTok. I could probably do more on TikTok, but I'm on TikTok technically. And I'm on YouTube as well. And if you want to check out my podcast, go to Muddy Waters Media. That is everywhere. That's on all social media platforms. It's on all podcasting platforms. You can check that out. And finally, if you want to find out more about libertarianism, go to lp.org. And you can find out about our platform and our beliefs. You can join if you want to. You can find out about your state and local affiliates like the Hampton Roads LP. And we invite you to join us. We recognize that the only way we are going to solve the problems that have been created for us by incredibly powerful people is by taking that power back, because it's not their power. It's our power, and it was robbed from us. And we can work together, and we can solve that. You are the power.
Yes, sir.
All right. Wow. Wow. We definitely have to have Spike back. Well, Spike, we're gonna send you off, man. Go with goodness, go with grace, and make some things happen, brother.
I'm gonna do it. Blue Cross Blue Chicken.
Blue Cross. Oh, that's hilarious. Blue Cross.
Blue Cross.
Blue Chicken.
And you're going to be allowed. You're going to be allowed to buy it across state lines.
Yes, yes. I only support chicken sandwich insurance that can be purchased across state lines. I think that there's absolutely no reason to limit that at the state level. Hey, y'all have a good night. Thank you so much.
All right. See you later. Wow. Wow. In the midst of all of this, we have some sanity, we have some guidance,
And some
we
passion.
have some direction, we have some passion, and we have some Blue Cross Blue Chicken.
Blue Chicken.
And you've been watching the Beach Brothers show. We thank you for enjoying the show. And hey, I think that's it.
Yes. We'll see you
I
next
think
time.
that's it. This show was brought to you by Positive Vibes Incorporated, our consulting services. We do credit fixes, we do tax resolution, we lend private money, and debt consolidation. So if you need some of these services, we're waiting here for you. Credit fixes, tax resolutions, private money, and debt consolidation. Make sure you call Positive Vibes Incorporated.